Welcome back, everybody, after the break. So we will start with session 6 now. The session 6 is a feedback panel for the providers. The panel will consist of speakers from session 5. The panel will be chaired by Ignacio Blanquet, working at the Polytechnic University of Valencia, but also one of the directors of the EOSC Association, one of the many that we met already during the last 2 days. Before I hand over to Ignacio to introduce the speakers and to start the session, we come to some housekeeping things again, and the use of Slido. And for this, I would like to ask Fotis in a minute to take over the screen. And as you saw, we have pre-prepared questions, and these pre-prepared questions can be answered by you in Slido and will then also be discussed during the panel. But Fotis will explain to you in a little bit more detail now how to exactly do this and how to participate. Fotis, please.
Yes, thanks, Miriam. So a few words on how to participate to this feedback session, which is now focusing on the providers and especially the thematic and RI providers. Note that yesterday there was a feedback session for potential EOSC end users, so now the focus is on providers. So for the feedback, we'll be using the Slido tool, not Zoom webinar. So forget about the Q&A from the Zoom webinar. We will be using Slido for everything. So on your PC or phone, go to Slido and enter the code. The code will be also visible in the next slide, but please note it down. There are 2 parts of this session, one with the predefined questions and polls, as Miriam said. All the predefined questions are also available in the website, in the program page. One session, one part, the other part is with open questions. So one with predefined questions and one with open questions from you, from the audience. Yesterday, this became one mixed session. We'll see how it will work today. You know, it's the first time we test this, let's say, setup. So on the first part with the predefined questions, there are 2 types of questions, the A and the P. The A stands for audience and P for panelists. The A questions are targeted to the audience. In fact, these are polls, Likert scale polls, and can be accessed via the polls tab of Slido. You see in the screenshot on the left, you know, click on polls for the A questions. The P questions are targeted to both panelists and audience, so and can be accessed via the Q&A tab on Slido. You see there also on the left in the screenshot. So how it will work? So Ignacio will be acting as the chair and moderator. Will be introducing the feedback questions named A and P. We start with the A questions, which are the polls, as we said. So go to the polls tab and submit your answer to the A questions. Polls will be changing as the panel moves to the next question. So stay tuned. There will be 8, oh no, yeah, less, I think 6 polls in this session. I'm not sure. 5 polls, yeah. Anyway, then we move to the P questions for both panelists and the audience. The idea is that while the panelists discuss the questions, the audience in parallel provides feedback. So all of these polls are accompanied by the P questions for which we need your input. So after you vote for each poll, you switch tab, you go to the Q&A on the left, and you know, you submit your answer or comment. Slido says ask your question, but you know, you can provide your answer or comment to the question. So yes, because yesterday people were only asking questions initially. So yes, you can also provide your comments and answers. And then the comments and and answers, and later the questions can be upvoted so that the most popular ones appear on top. And it could be good if you can also include the number of the P question you're answering, for example, P8, and then you type your comment so that it's easier for Per. So Per will be also helping with you know, getting track of some of your comments and summarizing some of the comments and then discussing them. So this is the overall setup. Handing back to you, Miriam.
Thanks very much, Fotis, for this clear explanation of this very difficult task. It's the first time that we do it like that, but yesterday it worked already quite well. So I hand over the screen to you, Ignacio. Good luck and fun with the next session.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, Fotis, for the organization. So welcome everybody to this session 6, which is a feedback panel. I mean, we are focusing, as Fotis said, in the providers, and we are trying to outline the added value of EOSC for thematic providers, and trying to outline also the cross-fertilization between thematic and generic providers. We have the panelists of the previous session. I really want to thank them for continuing with us, and I'm pretty sure that they will have more time now to express, I mean, their views and provide us with feedback on different areas, like the position on the different ESFRIs, the position of the different thematic clusters, the position on the regional projects, and a lot of different views that will complement this point. So, trying to outline, I mean, presenting, introducing a bit with how it will be the session, right? So the topic basically is the added value of EOSC for thematic providers, and also I would say and vice versa, because thematic providers are also providers that contribute to the EOSC, focusing on this cross-fertilization. Indeed, I think that thematic research infrastructures are a key building block for EOSC. I think it was also shared by the previous by the speakers, and also what it was discussed yesterday. And also, it will generalize and boost, I mean, EOSC could generalize and boost the impact that the thematic infrastructure, research infrastructures are having. So we want to gather feedback from providers and thematic and generic infrastructure on topics like the connection of research infrastructures, including ESFRI, another world-class research infrastructure to EOSC, the added value of EOSC for those communities, bringing the international research infrastructure up to speed up the take-up and the development of open science and the implementation of the FAIR policy agenda, and also the co-creation between providers and users in the EOSC vision presented by class in the EOSC for the EOSC future. So the logistic of the session has been explained already by Fotis. Please, Fotis, correct me if any point I run up in a different way, right? Okay. So let's start first with the first couple of questions, right? So these questions are focused on and trying to outline the added value of EOSC for the thematic providers and the international research infrastructure. Outline if it is, we are asking the audience if it is clear and strong, and also the question for the panel and also for the different, for the audience is what is the most important potential added value of EOSC for thematic providers, and what would be your major recommendation to achieve it? So meanwhile, the audience is answering in the poll. We will start posing this last question to our panel. So I will please ask you to be short in the answers, since we have many questions. We have many of us. So I will like to start with from the view of the ESFRI from the research infrastructure, right? So basically, Francisca, what will be your point of view from this this question of the added value? We don't hear you, Francisca.
Here I am.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would keep it short, mention two things. So the potential added value, or the actual added value for us, is that the whole concept of a federated research infrastructure has become much more clear in the landscape. So at that abstract conceptual level, I think we all benefit from discussions about EOSC because they help us to position ourselves and to clarify to our audiences that we're there and what we can bring to them. So that's a very generic one. The other thing is that the backbone already provided by EOSC is helpful. Everything related to a federation of generic services is very welcome. Also because it helps us underline the difference between generic stuff and thematic stuff.
Thank you. Very, very clear points. What about Elixir? Jonathan.
Yeah, hi. I think EOSC as a wider federation will only increase in value to researchers across the domains as it draws upon the actual researchers' needs, and that's driven through our RIs. So I think we've articulated rather well in the session the potential benefits for researchers, but clearly we're still in an implementation phase of the broader EOS services. So I can understand in the polling that the support is more qualified. So I think you know, it's kind of neck and neck between agree or neither agree nor disagree in terms of people's thoughts. Researchers have yet to be convinced because we have yet to make the broader EOS services available in a way that's noticeable by users, by researchers in the RIs. So I think that's our sort of next stage of development. I think we can help make those cross EOS level, those ESFRI level services more relevant by driving the needs from the researchers in our communities. And I think hopefully I showed a sort of nice example of how that's emerged in the case of Elixir and life science AI, how we've driven, but from the very early days worked closely through Corbel and the ARC projects to drive and help shape this AAI blueprint. And so we want a sort of an early pilot of that. I know there are others in other infrastructures as well. But we do have to return to the point about in order for RIs to do this and make it and encourage their researchers and their services within their domains to work with EOSC and be compliant with EOSC. We do need to think about how we incentivize that and whether we need specific funding schemes and so on.
Okay, thank you. Interesting point. So Isabel, since in your EOSC synergy you have a strong user community also. What is your view there?
Okay, here I would like then first to clarify when we speak about EOSC, we speak about which part of the whole concept. No, we have seen in the presentation of class before a sort of role of EOSC as a developer of a reference infrastructure integration layer that may be useful for some thematic services if it is modular enough, etc. So there is a role, in my view, there in as defining best practices, guidelines, core services, etc. That may be useful for some thematic communities, or we see EOSC just as a policy forum or ecosystem that encompasses all this, right? For example, where developers can always find information to ride the wave of technical, the latest developments, promote open developments, standardization, best practices on security, best practices on resource access, on data sharing. I say it highly depends on how deep EOSC goes. Yeah, if it stays at the level of reference and policy, or it goes deep down to implementation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very good point to continue with an answer from class. But I would like to, if just for the sake of time, if we can see the results of the poll, right? So maybe it could also serve class to have. Yeah, so it is clear that the perception of the advantage is not totally clear. So if we get, I mean, clearly a third of the people answer that they agree, and it's clear and strong. But maybe clear and strong, it could be answered separately. It will give a different, but it's not, I would say, a very hard answer, right? So, class, what would be your opinion on this?
Yeah, thank you, Ignacio, and good to see you without a mask for a long time, since a long time. So actually, I saw the figures going up on agree, and so that means that the speakers before me did a good job at explaining it. So I hope not to spoil that. And I think also in what Isabel said is a strong clue. We have everything to prove yet. And I completely understand if people are still skeptical about it. The promise, the end of the rainbow, to me is very clear. But getting there is going to take a lot of effort and requires all of us to chip in. So the potential value is very high. I completely understand if people are still undecided on whether we will deliver this. For me, the simple answer is it will break down. If we do this right, it will break down the walls of the silos. The core goal for me, for a thematic provider, is not to bring everything in that one place. It is provide as much value to the users of that thematic portal, regardless of where the content is. And I think that is the promise that we essentially make, that we will bring relevant resources to all the researchers, regardless of what cluster, infrastructure, whatever it is there, we will bring it to the researcher.
Thank you very much. Before, giving the word to our last panelist, can we go to the Q&A answers from the audience just to see how it went? Right. So the recommendation is both ESFRI RIs, and they use what they need from EOS. It will be more bottom-up than it seems at the moment. EOSC has been on the way for about 5 years. Some aspects EOSC is catching on ESFRI, some aspects are not. Time success value and focus resources, right? So I see that in general, it says that we have to, align, as we have said, and try to, create more, learn more from what's the success story of the different RIs. There's one question, I'm confused about the EOSC service and resources for me. Maybe I can ask, this question to Robert, since he presented this Fuji tool that could be a service or a resource in some case, right? So maybe, do you have an opinion for that or an answer?
Well, so from my perspective, a resource is more or less a generic term, and a service is something which actually provides you with a a service. This is, but it is these questions which have been posted there. I think also now show what the overall opinion on EOSC is, and there is a strong focus on the service architecture in the moment, and maybe this is something which also needs to be a little bit balanced, in particular with respect to the data offerings, which are not that strongly represented in EOSC in the moment. So, and which actually are at the heart of all what we do. And in the moment, we have a really good infrastructure for services, but we have a really lousy infrastructure for data.
Okay. Thank you very much, Robert. I think that we have to move to the next questions. There were a lot of very interesting comments, but I think that we should move, and we can have some of them in the last part. I mean, remember there will be an open Q&A at the end. Right, so the next point is the cooperation between thematic providers and generic providers, such GIANT, yes, please, yes, thank you. Such as GIANT, EGI, UDAT, OpenAir, in the context of EOSC is effective. This is what we are asking the audience to give their opinion. And for the panelists, what will be your major recommendation to improve the cooperation about this? So let me start with Klaas, giving the view from EOSC Future.
I think that the major thing for me is that with the EOSC Future project, we managed to get the big clusters and the large e-infra providers together. So in a sense, I would be tempted to say, well, we did what is needed. It is not without problems, and that mostly has to do with the way we are used to work. We all are in our established environment where we know our way, and this is something new and for me personally exciting. I think we are doing a much better job at coming from an e-infra perspective, listening to the users. I saw one of the comments in the Q&A also about that. We have a large user group from all through the community that we try to engage, and if you feel not heard, come to us. We really want to understand what the research communities need from us, and let me speak for myself. I think we have been for far too long thinking we build it and the users will come. I think it is pretty clear that that doesn't work. So now we are very much in collaboration with the user communities building things, and I just think we need to get even better at that.
Thank you, Klaas, for that. So, I mean, what would be the opinion from a project also that has users, thematic services, and providers like the regional project EOSC Synergy that has Isabel?
Yeah. Also with a strong involvement in EGI for many years, as we know. Yeah, it has been a number of years that this cooperation between infrastructures is being pursued, right? We learn a few things. Yeah, one of them is that cooperation cannot be enforced, especially when it implies competition for funds, right? So cooperation happens naturally only when there is a win-win situation for everybody, and when the people in charge have the foresight to see a bit in the future beyond the particular funding of a project, right? So that I would say is constructive competition, right? However, if people are in constant competition to abuse each other areas of expertise, then this is extremely destructive. I have that impression, yeah, that because the immediate consequence is that the research teams, the developers, etc., they stop providing feedback, and this we have observed in many ongoing projects. So, in my view, we should identify better and more clearly which are the areas of expertise of the infrastructures. Ask for cooperation, fine, but hey, good fences make good neighbors. Yeah, if define the boundaries that need to be respected when it comes to exploit the expertise of the different infrastructures. Otherwise, people become reluctant to cooperation because they are potentially destroying their sustainability, and that is something that we need to solve.
That's a very interesting point. I mean, indeed, I would like to hear the voice from the research infrastructures that also have to, I mean, to find this balance between what they provide with respect to the infrastructure. I don't know, maybe Francisca, you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I can say something. We've collaborated in the past with all these generic providers. And still are, and I think The most effective collaboration is in the context of European projects that have room for developing use cases and working on user requirements. But the whole concept of user is sometimes confusing in these contexts, because the research infrastructures zoom typically in on the should some in on the needs of their communities, while for the generic providers, the infrastructures are the primary users. And sometimes in the way in which projects are set up, this is not clearly recognized. I think currently we're doing better than in the past, but I also see the danger and the downsides of what Isabel was describing. Competition is not helping us in this context.
Thank you very much, Francesca. So let's see the opinion of the audience. So the audience is neutral. They neither agree nor disagree. And they also the figures with respect to agree, disagree, strong disagree, and fully agree are quite, they sum up more or less the same. So I would say that the audience is also doubtful about if it is effective, maybe because it's difficult to perceive exactly if it is effective or not.
Yeah.
We have
53 people in the poll, and the audience is almost three times as big. So let's keep that in mind as well.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. 55. Yeah, only half a third of the people answering. So I know that some questions will be difficult to answer from a whole perspective, since we're intended for providers, but also will be helpful to see your opinion in any case. Right, so can we see thank you. So we see a comment from Niklas that say the core role of ESFRI Research Infrastructure to deliver services to existing large user communities. EOSC can be seen a key supplier for research infrastructure focus on this value proposition. But I think it was disoriented to P9. I think that was, surely. Generic providers are also need to collaborate better between themselves, as there is competition among them. Yeah, this is also addressing the point of the competition, but it opens a new dimension, which is the competition within generic thematic providers, right? Let's say, from generic providers. Let me go to Jonathan as a last point. So do you foresee that the competition between the providers makes your choices, as a thematic provider, difficult or simplifies? Since you have some needs in your services and you will need some support from generic providers, is this competition among them helping you or making the decision more complex?
I think from our perspective, I'm not sure we necessarily have a picture of competing services. I think we are, I think in the Elixir community, that community has made a shift in thinking to thinking about across life sciences RI offer in terms of AAI. So people haven't objected to that. They've gradually been getting used to that idea. So I think they still see it that they are, hopefully, and this will be true for all the RIs, that we are gradually driving our requirements into these higher levels of cooperation, so that something more like network services, gradually take on the properties, so that at least a basic level of functionality is available as needed for the core purposes of a wider and wider range of thematic providers and users. So I think that's how I don't think we particularly see it as a competition. Usually, I think we're trying to help influence what is possible from this sort of federated set of services. That would at least be how I would think about this. But I do think that EOS can help in terms of being a supplier here. So the way that we are pointing to foundational services through AAI, for example, from Elixir, that, as I say, that is helping shape the thinking that, okay, there is this wider set of services and possibilities.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I think we only have time for a last reflection. I think that there is a question that is highly posed. This one about, we will be very happy to use EOSC, but nobody where I work knows about it. I think that clearly it reflects that this concept is more a concept than a ready-to-use tool. So I think it also was covered by you, class, in the presentation. Maybe you can have 30-second reflection in this comment.
Yeah, it is a fair comment, and it is just very difficult to reach everybody. The science community at large is large. We tend to go for the easy route, go through existing structures that we know and know how to address. We try to get beyond that. I mentioned this user group already that consists of some 500 people, but here we still have a lot of ground to win, and for that I'm also looking a bit at the EOSC Association that also can play an important role there.
Okay, thank you. I think I will take this question also for reflection later on in the session. So can we go to the next one, just because we only have, yeah. So this question says that the role of the EOSC Science Cluster and other thematic cluster portals and the work towards federation with EOSC, I think it also aligns quite well with the comment, and the EOSC development is effective. So please put your comment in the poll. And for the panel, what will be your major recommendation for thematic clusters and clouds? So let me see. Let me start from the EOSC. We don't have the science clusters here, right? So, but we have Francisca and Jonah representing more or less ESFRI project. No, more or less, sorry, representing ESFRI project. So, what will be your opinion, Francisca, please?
I'm conceptually we are fully in line with this statement. We see this as a driver for development and as a driver for articulation or value proposition, etc. So in principle, this is a model that I would embrace and give if there would be doubts, give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's my recommendation. Yeah. The other points have been made already in our presentations, I think. So yeah. The model of federation is very important. So there should be a lot of emphasis on the fact that for some thematic clusters, there are many centers involved in the national structures and in the maybe European structure. I also think that the model of federation is poorly understood by people that are not involved in the development. So you also see it in some of the questions. The fact that you should understand EOSC before you can use it is, I think, a misconception. But of course, it's us who are responsible for bringing that message across at the right levels and make sure that people don't start feeling uncertain because they don't know what EOSC is. That's the strangest reason not to ensure that they get engaged in what is available, even though I think that point was also made yesterday, and even this morning, the comparison with EduRoam is helpful for explaining that you don't have to understand who's owning it, who's paying for it, who's building it to use it. And universities should sort of buy in whatever way in the model of EOSC, and then make sure that whatever services are relevant for their communities are coupled to the backbone. But that's not the responsibility of individual users and communities.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Francisca. I also think that EduRoam is a good concept. However, it's very specific and sometimes difficult to to translate into other requirements and other positions. But it's a very good concept to understand what will be the wish from the users.
There's one more addition,
sorry.
Maybe. So
Sure.
we should not be too disruptive. And in many disciplines, it's now the case that the support facilities are coming from their institutions. And that should remain that way, which means that we should involve the universities and institutional help desks, etc., more and more in how we see EOSC functioning.
Okay, yeah, absolutely right. So let me also get the opinion. I mean, because Federation also in the AAI, meanwhile we are getting the answers from the audience. Federation is also quite important, a part of AAI. So maybe it's also a very specific concept, but also could bring some ideas. What's your opinion, Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I'm encouraged that I think we're seeing a slightly stronger result here. You know, just over half either agree or fully agree that they're seeing evidence of effective working. You know, the thematic clouds portals are influencing, are effective towards federation in EOSC. That's a really encouraging result, right? I think we all want to see that happen. So I'm encouraged by that. And I think you've seen in the way that we've described this evolution in thinking and technical development and alignment on standards, using international standards. I think you've seen how confidence has grown in the Elixir community to work with life science RI partners. Then we have life science AAI. And the next step is to be able to interoperate even better across science domains, not just within life sciences. But I think, you know, I often think that the conversation about researchers and their perceptions of EOSC is maybe doesn't always help us. You know, I would like to think that what we're building is a way of researchers will still learn and be most skilled in their own environment, their subdomain environment that they're in. What we would like is that at the higher level, that those services are interoperable across domains and across EOSC services and federations. So, you know, what that means is that a researcher, an individual researcher, doesn't necessarily need to be particularly aware. The best infrastructure is often under the hood. I've seen successful examples of that in the virtual observatory, in astronomy, for example, and obviously in bioinformatics. And so you want, I think the providers, the communities that are building their own tools, well, those people who are working on that infrastructure side of things, they will need to become proficient, and how can they interoperate, how can they use common standards. But ultimately, the individual researchers, I hope, will be able to stay in their familiar environment, but be able to gradually take more and more advantage and have visibility of services and resources across the EOSC.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can we see the opinion of the audience in the different questions? Right, so yeah, these are also related to the last point, I guess. Consolidating an infra service offering into one portfolio with clear perceived responsibility will help. Consolidating infra service offering into one portfolio with clear perceived, that's the same one. Planning for the support for array providers in terms of the never-ending fight for project-based budgeting. This was also addressed, I think, in the part of the competition that Isabel said. A good motto for EOSC will be collaborate on interfaces, compete on implementation. Open strong standards will also support procurement as well for SMEs. And the last point, yeah, I think that the others are quite in points that we have seen before. So is there any, before passing to the next point, is there any other opinion from the panel about this point of the federation that want to be addressed? So if not, we can move to, for the sake of time, to the next question. That is a long one. So please, Fotis. Yep, is the contribution of ESFRI and other world-class research infrastructures as driving the federation of thematic infrastructure and service and fostering open science practice in Europe in the development of EOSC is clear. So contribution as ESFRI and research infrastructure to foster open science in practice. So this is the point for the audience and the questions that we would like to discuss with the panelists. What will be your major recommendations? What do you think will be the current barriers? And who should the EC and national funders help the ESFRI and other world-class areas stimulating the uptake? So basically, recommendations, barriers, or who should we stimulate? Isabel,
I can break the ice if you. This is a complex thing. I mean, both EOSC and the ESFRI, let's say, infrastructures are top-down initiatives. Yeah? This did not came from individual researchers, right? So the challenge that actually is what generates a lot of barriers, yeah, is to connect with the actual people that needs to implement all that. So with the individual researchers. Yeah. So a top-down initiative created as a general policy, a huge infrastructure, very well funded, that aims of creating broad collaboration, needs to, let's say, permeate through all the layers to reach down to the developers and to the end users that will need to adopt this open science paradigm when they develop a source code, when they want to share data, etc. And at some point in that permeation layer, the whole thing breaks. This is my impression. It doesn't get through. Yeah, perhaps because it is not tangible enough at this moment. What one can get. How do I get CPU? Some of the people was asking. Myself, I get also asked by the university, but you say that you can provide the storage. Can you provide the storage for the whole University of Cantabria? I said, no, okay, but that don't say it. So a lot of clarity needs to be put there so that researchers start to know what to do with all this. Yeah, where is the point where they can link, for example, and a good start will be making promises that we can actually fulfill. Yeah, when we do offers in the marketplace. Providing, as Niklas was suggesting, a sort of layer of open standards that people could use, help user communities, so do something useful for people. Yeah, and that effort is again bottom up. That effort is bottom up. Yeah, it's very difficult that this comes from high level policy bodies. Yeah.
That's a very interesting point. I think that also it could also be similar to the problems that the evaluation of the FAIR principles in the data, the scientific data has, because there are many common points, but other points that are very dependent on the community. And as Robert presented with the need of assessment plus evaluation. So Robert, the contribution, how do you see the ESFRI from your point of view, from the difficulties that you also have seen in certifying, let's say, the compliance with the FAIR principles in different domains?
Yeah, so what I have seen during the last years, at least, was that the progress towards FAIR is really good. As the first point, and what I do not see as such a big problem is this domain-specific type of fairness, because this is in most cases really vaguely defined, and on the other hand also not always consistently implemented, even within these communities. And in addition to this, research infrastructure or data providers in general have a strong interest to distribute the data and make it available and findable to everyone. And in our times, this is mostly done using the help or the means of major search engines. So, and this is in the moment really promoting domain independent standards a lot. And this is what also the train research infrastructures are jumping on in the moment. So this is so what Google and Bing or others are demanding is really close to what we need to distribute the data beyond our own community.
Okay, so this could be another bottom-up driving force, like you say. I mean, this need from the, that also Isabel was mentioning, interesting. So before giving the floor to other panelists, can we see the opinion of the audience? Yep, so in general, the people agree, agree or fully agree. The contribution of ESFRI, I mean, for the federation and is clear, right? Class, from your point of view of EOSC Future, the contribution of infrastructures to support this open science and provide support to the ESFRI is also clear, or how it will be addressed in the context of EOSC Future?
I wouldn't go as far as say completely clear, but what I think maybe also in response to what Isabel was saying, I think we need both bottom up and top down. I used before the term utility, and I was talking about electricity, etc. I think maybe even a better example is the telephone. The first person that bought a telephone was an idiot because he had nobody to talk to. And then I mentioned the network effect, and that is very much here. I do believe you need a basic core infrastructure to enable the innovation at the edges. And that part I do agree with Isabel. We need also the edges, the end researchers to buy into this and start doing things, and probably use what we built in a completely different way than we had envisioned it. But I do believe we, top down, needs to provide a sort of basic infrastructure, the main roads, if you want, between the cities, in order to make it useful for somebody to build a road to his own house. And I think that's also very much in line with what Francisca said before. And one last sentence again to this telephone. Please come to EOSC, give it a chance, make sure that we have lots of people to call if we pick up the phone. If we don't believe in it, it will certainly not work. So give it a chance, because I think the pot of gold and the rainbow is very big if we pull this off.
Thank you so much, Klaas, for this reflection. So just to end with this question, can we see if there's any question and answer that we will be very quick. Yeah, 100% with Isabel. EOSC is not tangible enough from research perspective. I think that what Klaas said, I mean, we have to make this clear and stimulate people. EOSC seems to offer lots of service, not obvious they can bring to my daily research work. Exactly. So there's a lot of need for clarification and building up. Francisca, I want to say something? Yes, please.
Yeah, because in the question, there's explicit reference to the role of ESFRI. And I would like to bring up something related to how ESFRI can avoid blocking collaboration across domains. Because there is now a sort of tendency to say that we should, all clusters or all domains should collaborate in the context of multidisciplinary agendas. But I would want to avoid that we are forced or accredited for collaboration between research infrastructures or clusters, while actually a research infrastructure in domain X can work well with a research community in domain Y without needing the collaboration with the research infrastructure. And I would not put any credits or bonuses on that collaboration because it may enforce a more abstract approach than is needed. So, for example, we can do things with people in the health domain. We're doing things in the health domain, but they don't have a clear link with the biomedical research infrastructures because their data is somewhere else, or their research questions are coming from other agendas. And I would, that should still be encouraged and not be, how to say that, seen as undesirable because there is, from the ESFRI perspective, no collaboration between domains.
Very interesting point to take note. I mean, especially with this, fragmented domain that we sometimes see in this, all the ESFRI research infrastructure. So for the sake of time, since we are running out of time, so we have to go to the last question, which is the role of national, regional initiatives or projects in the EOSC development is vital. That's just for the audience. What would be your major recommendation toward national, regional initiatives? Yep, so Francisca and then Isabel, because I think that also is quite aligned. Please, Francisca.
I will be quick. I think the role is vital, but my recommendation would be that in the national context and in the regional context, there is good alignment with the science agendas, because policymakers at the national level don't always have good connections with the dynamics in the disciplinary domain. And if this is all about making science better or making European science better, the disciplinary dynamics should always be part of the picture, and national interests sometimes are orthogonal to that.
Interesting. Isabel, what's your opinion from the national regional project?
Yeah, regarding ESFRI and out of the experience we have dealing with, let's say, Spanish partners in ESFRI projects and ESFRI consortia. So my impression is that things are going well, in the sense that people are not trying to reinvent wheels and are building on what already has been developed in an interoperable way, etc. So I would say one has to reinforce a bit that vision, that not because you are in a particular country or region you can ignore the way technology is developing or the standards or let's say open source initiatives, etc. So I would say as major recommendation, we try to keep interoperable, don't reinvent wheels, and look out for what is already around. Yeah.
Right. So maybe we have outlined more the European dimension rather than the national dimension in these 2 points, which is also interesting as a clear recommendation, right? So in the case of Elixir, which also has a national dimension and a regional, a European dimension, what would be your major recommendation in this regard? Jonathan?
Yeah, we are, as an infrastructure, we're driven quite strongly by everything has to be sort of ratified, agreed through our nodes, our member states, and they very much drive our coordination. So which services are we promoting? Which services do we agree as a community need to be underwritten, and therefore take precedence in terms of resource for matching, for ensuring interoperability in the long, both in terms of time, over long periods of time, but also obviously at the standards level, making sure that they will federate with the EOS Federation. So we certainly are driven strongly by, you can see there's strong agreement in the poll here as far as those national, regional, project level developments are concerned. I mean, I think my experience in research over decades and research infrastructures is that the projects do tend to dominate, right? And people move with those because that's where resource is typically available, obviously, for new development. What we struggle with, of course, is aligning resource and funding with that wider infrastructure layer. So yeah, national and regional initiatives are certainly important, and I've seen direct experience of how new innovative work at the national regional project level can be translated to the infrastructure level, to the ESFRI level across infrastructures. But it's a challenge that's, I think we all agree that there's a gap there. It's not always easy. And I think the way we in Elixir identify the candidates is through our members, through our member states, through agreements, through our platforms, technical platforms, and so on, about what are the priority services, and ensure that they are promoted for wider interoperation at the EOS level.
Okay, so we see different, I mean, the policy level and the orthogonality of the priorities, the need of coordination and the technical coordination at all the levels. So meanwhile, we see the questions, please Fotis. I would like to ask class first about how is the role of the national investment considered in the EOSC future, if you have a clear guide on this.
Well, I would like to take it a little bit broader. I think there is this term permissionless innovation that I think is very important here. You don't want to be too specific about what you require people to do, because you want the bright minds to come up with something that you have never thought of and have may win out in the end. I think that I would phrase it like that. So, but having said that, I think the effect of things like open data, FAIR, etc., can hardly be overestimated. So I do think national and European bodies have played a very important role in setting some basic conditions. If you want our money, there are some principles you need to adhere to, and I would like us to focus on these kind of things. What are the principles that we agree we follow, and not be too specific about the implementation about those principles, because that will settle as we go along. And I think, and I would say that would be my call for both the European Commission and national bodies, to stick to some sort of basic core principles and not try to over-regulate what you come up with.
Thank you, class. So let me focus on two questions that are, or two comments that are for me very interesting, because they are just going in the opposite direction. So there's at one point saying that national infrastructure providers see EOSC as a competitor, and the other is national dimension is vital for EOSC success. Different models for different countries can help building the national open science cloud initiative, like the Italian ICD and the German one and the others. So who wants to react to this? Why do you think that there are people, because the second point is more shared, I think, in our view, thinking that the national infrastructure providers see EOSC as competitors. Anyone want to get this? Yep, Francisca? We don't hear you, sorry, you're mute. Still mute?
Yeah. This perception is of course not mine, but what I do see is that funding issues may play a role. Of course, national infrastructures are supported financially by national institutes, ministries, etc. EOSC is funded in a very hybrid way, because, for example, the budgets for the research infrastructures also come from the country and in part from the European Commission and maybe other stakeholders. But up till recently, it wasn't so clear that there were two channels by which you could contribute to establishing nodes that would help shape EOSC. And I think countries like to fund their national stuff. And I fear that if there is no good communication about the added value of the disciplinary and cluster perspective or the thematic perspective, that countries may become hesitant in supporting those initiatives. Well, I think they are very important for, as I just mentioned in the previous round, for ensuring that scientific considerations are taken into account.
Yeah, no, my impression is similar. But I mean, if the funding lines in the countries and in Europe do not get themselves organized to avoid that perception that EOSC is a competitor to national infrastructure, that's a recipe for disaster. Because the researchers are in the countries, and the only way to get to them is through the capillarity of the national infrastructures. You will not get anyone sitting 2,000 kilometers away talking to the users of a department in the university. We know that. Yeah. So they better get the act together, and people finds a way to survive economically with projects, etc., in a cooperative way. Because cutting the line with the users is something that is in the hands of the national infrastructures if they see themselves in danger. So they are in command, right?
Point. More comments. Klaas, do you want to say something, I guess?
Yeah, I'd like to say something about the comment about convergence between nations and what generic services are of value, and because it mentions EduRoam, and I care deeply about that, of course. But I think it is a misunderstanding if you think that when we did EduRoam, that we from the start painted everything closed and defined precisely what it should look like. In the early days, our biggest problem was interoperability, because everybody did it just a little bit different. And that was very painful, but I still think that it was inevitable. I think Nicolas said it in another comment, you want to settle on standards, but you want to have to compete on implementations. That's basically what we did. We agreed that we would follow the 802.1x standard, that we would use radius, and for the rest, we left it very much to the individual organizations that were starting with this. And only when a right way to do things emerged, we essentially wrote that down and made it the standard. So if you look at the EduRoam RFC that we published in the IETF, for instance, that happened more than 10 years after we started with EduRoam. And it was more writing down what the common opinion was by that time than that we beforehand settled that all. And EduRoam is a super simple service. It does only one thing. It just, the authentication equals authorization. You just has this person successfully authenticated, and that's it. The services that we are talking about here are way more complex. They are of varying value. They have very different ways of assigning resources. They have complex authorization rules, etc. So we are truly trying to do something much more complex than the simple thing that is EduRoam. But I still think we need to follow that same way. And so yes, at some point we hopefully will reach a point where we say, if you want to do EOSC, you have to tick this, and this box. But we're not there yet. So let's do this together and make it something useful for all of us. I'll step down from my pedestal right now.
Thank you, Klaas. So since we are approaching the end of the session, I think we can just get, I mean, Fotis, can you order the question for the most voted just to see if we have just one missing? And in meanwhile, I would like to, I mean, I know Isabel has to run, so to have a last statement from everybody before I make the wrap up. So maybe I can start with Isabel since it has to hurry up.
No, okay. I think it has been a quite useful and open discussion. Yeah, I wish we could have it physically, because typically one tends to solve more problems face to face, and to put let's say duties on all of us to try to make EOSC something that is more tangible and that has a well-defined way of cooperating with thematic service developers and thematic service providers. That will be my wish list.
Thank you, Isabel. Next one, please, Robert.
Yeah, I would just like to comment on this anonymous comment on the national providers. So, because I was involved in several discussions in Germany at the construction level of NFDI now, so this is something which is happening now, and I hear a lot of times that the comment, we can do it better than the EOSC. But at the same time, when people need to communicate at the national level and to agree on standards, for example, and on policies and so on, they immediately start to look at what the EOSC has done. And this is a very important aspect of the EOSC. I think Franziska mentioned that before, these policy work which has been done, for example, the PID policy which has been set up. So to define what things are a fair policy, PID policy, and so on. This is what can easily be picked up by national initiatives, and this is going to strongly influence, of course, the setup of national infrastructures.
Thank you, Robert. I think that in many cases we can say that the national providers are already part of EOSC. I mean, they are not competing; they are already part of them, right? So part of the solution. So thank you. Let's move to another opinion. So Jonathan, please.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how we can sort of try and wrap up some of the things we've been saying.
Difficult.
Yeah, I think that what we've heard from the national, that sort of national perspective, or even to react to the previous panelists, perhaps, I think they're probably right in most cases that what's already happening within a domain, within a region, those regions, those nations, those projects, they know their own users best, and that, they've specifically designed something for their environment. The whole point is not to say that EOSC and ESFRI collaborative services are somehow in competition with that. It's to say, how can you go one further? How can you interoperate? How can you also share resources and hopefully over time share costs, because we can't all pay for everything separately. It doesn't scale, it won't sustain. So EOSC, I'd like to think the conversation is about not losing the best things about what we develop in our own communities and infrastructures, but how can we build on that, and where it makes sense, where do we share resources and scale? It's a similar argument you have whenever you federate organizations as well.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I would like to also to hear last point from class. Maybe also, you had a very lively discussion among this. Considering if EOSC should be highly disruptive, highly evolving from what is well adopted. So what is your final statement in general?
I think what I would say is that I try to always see the other side of things, so I've argued a couple of times for more top-down than I probably myself would be comfortable with, just to give the balance. But for me, that is the important thing. The important thing is that we shoot on both ends, and we need to both have the bottom-up and the top-down approach. But yes, it is very important that we make new ways of doing science possible, and not remain stuck in our existing ways. At the same time, as I said in the Q&A, I don't believe in flag days. We've tried that before. It usually horribly fails. We need to find an incremental way of changing the world, and we do that, I think, by making more and more capabilities available for those young and wild researchers that want to do things completely different without putting all us older and wiser and sadder, etc., people out of our comfort zone.
Okay, thank you, Klaas. Francisca, your final statement for the session.
Yeah, so I'll take the top statement as a starting point, because here the question is, what can ESFRI do to make it happen, to make sure that the believers are not just in one corner. I would hope that the people responsible and supporting the ESFRI policies would come with questions to the research infrastructure that in their framework has been funded. Lots of investments have gone into the research infrastructures, and if there needs to be more clarity on the division of roles between national providers and thematic providers, then let's make sure we talk about it. So my question, part of my response to this question is, can ESFRI make sure that we talk to the right people, or that they talk to the right people?
Right. Thank you very much all the panelists for their input. I think that we are just in time for the wrap-up. For me, the wrap-up would be quite complicated now to make it. I'll try to, I outline some ideas. But clearly, I think that we have to define, to explain better the role of EOSC, explain better that there are many contributors already to EOSC. There are national contributors, there are regional, there are thematic users. Try to define what will be the global context, what will be the policies, what will be the standards, how they will contribute in order to break the silos and break the walls among the different providers to adapt common standards, facilitate the cooperation between researchers, among researchers of different types of infrastructure, because some of these silos or these thematic areas are now breaking down due to the multidisciplinarity of many of the development. Also, it's important to clarify the role of the infrastructures, as this is a very basic need for some of the service, for all the services to be developed, to identify the win-win situations that in this cooperation, and try to foster and leverage on these win-win situations to build up EOSC. Create a sound environment for federation and collaboration among the different contributors, and also it was very clear that the federation was one of the points that was more there were more agreement among the audience and also the panelists that is key and is the only way to reach the success. There was also discussion about the bottom-up and the top-down approach, and we end up saying that they both are very highly needed, and also that our institutions and ESFRI has capability on helping us on setting up the scene in order to make this collaboration happening. Avoid highly regulations, but try to define common goals and common points. Trying to define new environments for the future, but building up as evolving of the environments that we have now, and many other points that I will try to summarize. Thank you very much to the panelists and the audience. And back to Miriam.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. Thank you very much to the whole panel for this very interesting and nice session. Great discussions.